looked, I saw him, I said, I can't do this, and I walked off. I couldn't talk.
Hollywood has seen scandals, betrayals, and public collapses, but nothing prepared it for what happened on the night of December 14th, 2025. When news broke that legendary filmmaker Rob Reiner and his wife were brutally murdered inside their own Brentwood home, the industry froze. This wasn't a random crime. This wasn't a burglary gone wrong. From the very first hours, something felt deeply personal, disturbingly intimate. And then came the moment that shattered the silence. Billy Crystal Reiner's closest friend for nearly 50 years did something no one expected. Still shaking with grief, he picked up the phone and spoke to Rolling Stone. What he revealed was not sympathy. It was accusation, an unfinished will, a poisoned family bond, a fear Reiner had lived with in his final months, and one name that no one wanted to hear, spoken aloud. Because if Billy Crystal was telling the truth, this tragedy didn't come from outside the family, it came from within. And what he said next would change everything. Billy Crystal was never a man who chased controversy. For decades, he was Hollywood's emotional anchor, beloved, diplomatic, careful with words. That is precisely why his reactions stunned everyone. When Rob Reiner died, Billy didn't retreat into polite mourning. He exploded. And that explosion came from a place far deeper than anger. It came from loyalty. Crystal had known Reiner since the 1,970 seconds, long before awards and legacy entered the picture. He knew the man behind the director. He knew his fears, his regrets, and most importantly, his private anxieties about family. When Billy spoke to Rolling Stone, his voice reportedly trembled not because he doubted himself, but because he knew the consequences of speaking. He understood Hollywood's unspoken rule: family matters stay buried. Yet he broke that rule deliberately. He talked about Rob's fear, about repeated changes to his will, about a son who had caused pain for years. Billy didn't sound speculative, he sounded certain. What made his words so unsettling was not their drama, but their specificity. This wasn't gossip. This was a man recalling conversations that happened behind closed doors, over dinner tables, in moments of vulnerability. Billy Crystal didn't just mourn Rob Reiner, he defended him. And in doing so, he forced the public to confront a question Hollywood hates most. What happens when blood becomes the greatest threat? Rob Reiner spent his life telling stories about connection, loyalty, and chosen family. From Stand By Me to The Princess Bride, his films reflected a deep belief in human goodness. Off-screen, that belief shaped his real life, especially as a father. Reiner was known to be fiercely devoted to his children, often to a fault. Friends say he believed unconditional love could fix anything. But love, when unbalanced, can become dangerous. In his final years, those close to Rob noticed a change. He became more cautious, more guarded. Conversations that once revolved around films and politics began circling back to concern especially about one son struggling with addiction and instability. Rob didn't speak publicly about it, but privately, the anxiety was constant. He adjusted his estate plans repeatedly, attempting to protect the rest of his family from financial and emotional fallout. What haunted Rob most wasn't money. It was guilt. The guilt of a father who wondered whether saving one child might destroy the others. That internal conflict weighed heavily on him. Billy Crystal later hinted that Rob felt trapped, unable to pull away, yet afraid of what might happen if he didn't. When news emerged that Rob and his wife were murdered inside their own home, those past fears suddenly looked less abstract. The question no one wanted to ask became unavoidable. Was Rob Reiner living with a danger he could never bring himself to confront? Rob Reiner's son had long been known in quiet Hollywood circles as the troubled one. Addiction, instability, periods of estrangement. It was not a secret, but it was carefully managed. Rob believed in redemption with almost religious conviction. He poured money, time, and creative energy into helping his son recover. Being Charlie was not just a film. It was a cinematic intervention, but addiction doesn't disappear because love demands it. According to those close to the family, cycles repeated, promises were made, boundaries were crossed, trust eroded, and with each relapse, Rob's fear deepened. Not fear of harm, but fear of consequence. He worried about manipulation, about pressure, about what desperation could drive someone to do. Billy Crystal's accusation hit so hard because it aligned with whispers that had existed for years, whispers that Rob felt emotionally blackmailed, whispers that financial control had become leverage. None of it was ever proven. None of it needed to be until tragedy forced everything into the light. The idea that a son might turn against the father who never gave up on him is almost unbearable. Yet history is filled with families where love and resentment coexist violently. If this suspicion proves true, then Rob Reiner's greatest compassion may have also been his greatest vulnerability. Michelle Singer Reiner rarely sought the spotlight, but within the Reiner household, she was the stabilizing force. Friends describe her as observant, protective, and deeply aware of the family's internal tensions. Where Rob led with emotion, Michelle led with caution. She saw patterns others preferred to ignore, and she worried especially about safety. In private conversations, Michelle reportedly urged Rob to set firmer boundaries, to stop enabling, to protect himself. But Rob struggled to do what felt, to him, like abandonment. Michelle became the buffer, the one who tried to maintain peace while quietly preparing for worst-case scenarios. That role came with its own emotional toll. Her death alongside Rob's made the crime even more chilling. Michelle was not collateral. She was a witness to years of conflict, years of concern, years of difficult truths. If the attack was personal, then Michelle was not merely present, she was part of the story. Hollywood often overlooks the spouses who hold famous lives together. But Michelle Singer Reiner's presence mattered, and her loss raises another haunting question. Was she targeted because she knew too much, or because she stood in the way? For Billy Crystal, the Brentwood house was never just Rob's home. It was a second home, a place of laughter, dinners, late-night conversations, and shared history. That is what made seeing it sealed with police tape so devastating. The violence didn't occur in isolation, it occurred in a space filled with memory. Investigators reportedly noted the absence of forced entry. No chaotic signs of a robbery. The crime scene suggested familiarity, comfort, access. That detail alone shifted the narrative from random violence to something far more disturbing. Someone inside that house knew how to move through it, knew where people slept, knew how to get close. The idea that such brutality could unfold in a place so deeply associated with warmth shook Hollywood's sense of safety. If a man like Rob Reiner, wealthy, famous, guarded, was vulnerable in his own home, then no legacy was immune. The house became a symbol overnight, not of success, but of denial, of the illusion that love and wealth can insulate a family from collapse. Brentwood wasn't just a location, it was the final stage of a tragedy years in the making. At first, Hollywood mourned. Tributes poured in. Directors, actors, writers spoke of Rob Reiner as a mentor, a moral compass, a storyteller who shaped generations. But as Billy Crystal's words spread, the tone shifted. Grief gave way to unease. Conversations lowered. Questions surfaced. People began re-examining old interviews, old anecdotes, subtle hints of family strain that once seemed insignificant. The industry is skilled at collective silence, but it is equally skilled at recognizing patterns, and the pattern emerging was uncomfortable. Some defended the family fiercely, urging caution. Others privately admitted they weren't surprised. Hollywood has seen this story before. Unchecked loyalty, blurred boundaries, love turned combustible. What made this case different was its intimacy, its cruelty, its refusal to fit a clean narrative. Behind closed doors, agents and producers asked the same question fans were asking online. How much did Rob know, and how long had he been afraid? The investigation will deliver facts. Courts may deliver verdicts, but some questions will never find closure. Was this tragedy inevitable or preventable? Was Rob Reiner protecting his family or protecting a lie? And did speaking too late cost him everything? Billy Crystal's words ensured one thing: this story would not be buried under polite condolences. By breaking silence, he forced the public to confront the darker side of unconditional love, the side where compassion becomes complicity, where forgiveness delays accountability. Rob Reiner's films taught audiences about loyalty and friendship. His death may teach a far harsher lesson that even the most loving families can fracture beyond repair, and that sometimes the greatest danger doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people we love most. The tragedy surrounding Rob Reiner's death is not just another Hollywood crime story destined to fade into headlines and speculation. It is a brutal reminder that even the most admired lives can unravel quietly, behind closed doors, long before the world notices the cracks. Reiner was a man who spent his career celebrating friendship, loyalty, and human connection. Yet, in the end, the very values he believed in most may have left him exposed to the deepest betrayal imaginable. What makes this story so unsettling is not only the violence, but the familiarity of it. There were no warning sirens, no public meltdowns, no tabloid chaos leading up to that night in Brentwood. From the outside, everything looked intact. A legendary filmmaker, a stable marriage, a successful life. And that illusion is exactly what makes the tragedy resonate so deeply with audiences, especially those who have lived long enough to know that appearances often lie. Billy Crystal's decision to speak out shattered Hollywood's preferred response to family tragedy. Silence. His words forced an uncomfortable conversation about unconditional love, about how far a parent should go to save a child, and about the dangerous line between compassion and denial. Whether his suspicions are ultimately proven or not, one truth is already clear. Rob Reiner was living with fear, and that fear was never addressed publicly until it was too late. Michelle Singer Reiner's death adds another layer of heartbreak. Often overlooked in public narratives, she may have been the quiet guardian of the family, the one who saw the risks most clearly and tried to hold the fragile balance together. Her loss reminds us that family conflicts rarely affect just one person. They ripple outward, pulling everyone into their gravity. This case leaves us with questions that no verdict can fully answer. Could intervention have changed the outcome? Did loyalty delay action? And how many families, famous or not, are quietly living with similar tensions, believing love alone will fix what is fundamentally broken? As viewers, we are left not just to mourn Rob Reiner the filmmaker, but to reflect on Rob Reiner the father, the friend, the man who gave so much of himself to others. His story forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones we refuse to acknowledge. If this story moved you, unsettled you, or made you reflect on the hidden realities behind public lives, don't stay silent. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe this tragedy was unavoidable? Or do you think the warning signs were there all along? Your perspective matters. And if you want more in-depth stories that go beyond the surface of Hollywood fame, stories that explore the real human cost behind celebrity legacies, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. Because some stories aren't just meant to be watched, they're meant to be questioned.